All right. There are. Wait, we want Edwin in here. Oh, there he is. Okay.
We definitely want Edwin.
Yeah, I saw him on the right, and I didn't see him on the. Okay.
You see him on the wrong.
From session. Okay, if a Sweeney is the only person in the group in the session, I'm gonna we don't have to start. we can wait until How do I get Lindsay in here? It says invite to video call.
Yeah, that's one way you could do it. And then she'll have to use that share button in the upper right-hand corner of her.
Oh no, I'm inviting you to a private meeting room. Is that what that sounds lurid? Okay.
She tried clicking on this. Oh, there you go.
Oh, she's okay.
The share button, probably.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Have there been any issues so far, Edwin, with anything that you've done in this format?
No, it's worked out. I mean, it's kind of last second. It would have been nice to have a little bit more breathing room between stuff, but it's all right.
I popped in on the main stage there. Looked like you had a good crowd for that one.
Yeah, it's good
conversation.
Yeah, it was a robust conversation with a robust chat. So I tried not to talk too much about what we're going to talk about in this section, but this is actually, honestly, this is what I really want to talk about. So it was hard to be like, no, I'm not going to talk about that.
Oh, that's funny because I did hear you talking in that one, and I heard some of the things that we're talking about. So I then try and find our session. So I left. What was that one supposed to? What was that?
It was about just the government response and how we tried to do things quickly, which is antithetical to the government often. So just kind of talking about the challenges and mistakes and lessons learned. So,
right.
See, is Adam and Edwin's video showing up for you?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Uh-oh.
Now we got a few extra people. Yeah, I can see and hear all of you, which is as it should be. And if somebody else, so if somebody wants to ask a question, Sweeney, can you test out the something? There's supposed to be a way that I can let someone else have a video, or we can just have everybody who wants to ask questions in the chat.
Yeah,
is that the thing to do?
I believe there's a button they can press to be added into. There you go. For example, I think Amanda just did so, and then you would press the plus to approve it.
And then I plussed her. Yeah. Okay. But that's on their end. Now Amanda's a part of it, and I'm just gonna let Amanda moderate this panel then, and I'm gonna go take a nap.
I just wanted to say hi.
Is that okay with everyone?
And yeah, if anybody wants to speak, there is a button on the top right-hand corner of the screen that says something to the extent of request access. But I'm going to leave now. Hi.
Sweet. Great. Thanks for the little tech support help, Amanda. This is where we banter. Lindsay, how has your Wednesday been?
It's been good.
That's a good start.
Working with some different community groups to continue to get the word out there about curbside meals. So
are you at, because we're not at, you're not at 100% pickup all the time?
yeah, we've seen actually a slight decline in January in comparison to December. So just kind of trying to figure out what's going on with that, and just make sure people remember and are aware that the meals are available.
It's so tricky just as a parent, just trying to keep track of, are my kids in school today or not? Or like, who am I? Like, who are my kids? Like, much less like, have they eaten food? I don't know.
I keep hoping that somebody's going to accidentally just pick up my kids and have them for a while and not even realize that happened. It hasn't.
I feel like
My kids wouldn't notice.
I feel like that happens, and it may not lead to good outcomes.
Oh. All right. There are probably a couple people listening who don't know that was a joke. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a minion. So hello, and thank you for joining this session about public-private partnerships and Good Work Austin, and how the city and local restaurants in particular have responded to the pandemic thus far, and how we would like to see our efforts extend and continue and expand through the recovery, and in particular post-pandemic, to create the resilience that I think it's fair to say, did not have certainly in March, and we're definitely getting to a place where of greater resilience, where some of the questions that we didn't ask initially are being asked and being addressed. My name is Adam Orman. I am with Good Work Austin, a small business association that is dedicated to providing support and resources for local owners who want to provide progressive benefits for their employees, and also to advocate for employee-friendly and small business-friendly legislation at the city and state level. I also am the co-owner of Locadoro Restaurant, which has been involved in the AISD Caregivers Program, which you will hear about. I was named correctly, and now I no longer am. I'll work on that. If folks in the chat can easily, this isn't like Zoom. Usually I ask people to enter organization and their pronouns by way of an introduction. We'd appreciate it. We'll all try and figure out if that's something that we can easily do in the new format. We appreciate all our colleagues and friends from the Cook's Nook for organizing the conference, everyone here for joining. Let's go to our panelists for short. But before we begin, we would like to recognize the historical beginnings of the land on which we gather in the past, as we try to create a more equitable future by untangling the historical knots of colonialism. We are meeting on Tonkawa and Comanche land and pay our respects to other American Indian and indigenous communities who have been a part of these lands and territories in Central Texas. Having said that, Lindsay Bradley is no longer with us. Amit Matwani is with us. Let's go to Edwin, because I can see for sure that you are still with us.
I think Lindsay's still with us, but thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate being included on this panel, and certainly appreciate the land acknowledgement. It's a huge part of what we need to be talking about in more earnest. But I'm Edwin Marty. I'm the food policy manager with the City of Austin's Office of Sustainability. Pre-pandemic, I was involved with helping the city think strategically about its role within the food system, working on things like supporting local food production, increasing distribution opportunities, decreasing food insecurity, decreasing food waste, a whole range of different issues. And then pandemic hit back in March, and got brought into the Emergency Operations Center which is the intergovernmental system for addressing the pandemic, and have been working on food access issues primarily for the last 6-7 months, focused on trying to get community members throughout Austin, Travis County, and the region adequate access to nutritionally sound, good food, and hypothetically, hopefully, supporting local economies as well.
Thanks, Edwin. Amit, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course, glad to. And also like to extend our thanks to Cook's Nook for having put this conference together. I serve on Dr. Rosa Maria Murillo's executive team at El Buen Samaritano as the Chief Operating Officer, where I like to say, though I wasn't there at the time this occurred, just in retrospect, I always like to say 2 days, 3x, 20K, 2 days, 3x, 20K. And, back when, the emergency was official here in Austin around the pandemic, I know that El Buen Samaritano closed for 2 days, our pantry program. And when it returned, it had 3x its capacity in a way to be able to serve folks in a contactless, as safe as we knew and know manner in a drive-through format, such that we had tripled our capacity from, the ability to serve about 6,000 family visits a year to over 20,000 family visits a year. So 2 days, 3x, 20K. I'd also like to, I just mentioned what a privilege it is to be in the same room, not just with Edwin, of course, and Lindsay with the district, but with Good Work Austin, who, an organization that is founded upon the principles of implementing sick leave, livable wages, affordable access to healthcare and wellness. I think, anything that will radiate from that organization from there on out is certainly going to be well principled and highly probable part of the solution. Thanks.
Thank you, Amit. Thanks for the kind words. Lindsay, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So my name is Lindsay Bradley. I
just came off.
Am with Austin ISD Food Service.
All right. Well, Lindsay, we'll ask our first question.
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Lindsay's, we can hear Lindsay okay. There might be an issue with you not being able to hear Lindsay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
Oh. So again, my name is Lindsay Bradley. I am with Austin ISD Food Service. And
okay, I'm not sure how to...
Maybe, Lindsay, maybe pause for a second. Adam, do you want to try exiting and re-entering the session and seeing what that does?
Sure. Go ahead and continue. And
okay, and when you re-enter, just assume that Lindsay's speaking.
Sorry, everybody. The way of the world right now, technical difficulties. So within Austin ISD Food Service, every single day, our mission is to continue to provide healthy, tasty, good quality food access within our community. During a regular school year, about 2/3 of our students, around 75,000 total students within Austin ISD, around 2/3 of those are identified as economically disadvantaged and rely on school meals. And so we know that the pandemic has amplified the need for good, healthy food in Austin and around the country and the world. So I'm excited to share about these partnerships that have developed to kind of continue to expand all of our missions and continue to expand healthy food in Austin. So thank you for including us.
thank you, Lindsay. Great. Good job with the IT on that as well, Amit. It's always turn it off, turn it on.
Yeah, did you try rebooting?
Plug it back in. Yeah, thank you. So we want to start right before March. And we're going to go around the room here. When were your first conversations around pandemic preparation, and what did you identify then as your largest obstacles, with an eye on developing a circular network? Tell us a little bit about how you got a program up and running that would address Austin's needs. And we'll start with you, Lindsay.
Right, so thinking back to last spring, I think we were, walking alongside with the city of Austin, kind of following their lead on what was developing, what was coming, creating conversations, I believe, late February into the beginning of March. Our world kind of changed on March 13th, Friday the 13th. They made the decision on that morning to close campuses, and that was the Friday before our spring break. We had, like I said, we had been planning, wasn't sure exactly when that was going to come, and it came much sooner than we expected. So we turned around that day, launched some curbside meal sites throughout the city just to make sure that our students would have access to food that day, even though they were not in the classroom. During that time, we were operating under National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program. Those programs do not allow us to serve during student breaks. So we were not serving meals during spring break, but our teams were working hard to collaborate internally and externally to really nail down a plan, so that that Monday, when we were able to begin serving meals, no matter where or how students were learning, we would have that option of healthy meals for them. And that included developing a curbside meal plan, so expanding upon what we had done on that Friday, also working with the transportation department to deliver meals at bus stop locations throughout the city as well. During that week, there was a lot going on during our spring break. The district and the Austin Ed Fund created the AISD Crisis Support Fund, which was created to support our students and families and campuses as the pandemic was building. And as I mentioned, as we follow these federally funded programs, we are only able to receive reimbursement for meals served to children, student meals. And so early on, it was decided that we needed to further support our families any way that we could. And so through that AISD Crisis Support Fund, outside donors, significant funding from HEB kind of kicked off a caregiver meal program. And so caregiver meals were available and still are available for any adults accompanying their children to any of our curbside meal sites, as well as those who are picking up meals with their children maybe not present, but have that documentation. So through that initial funding, we kind of realized what we had taken on, and it was quite a different challenge than what we were used to with serving meals in the cafeteria every day. We pride ourselves on the quality of food that we prepare. Our kitchens are built to serve, scratch prepared meals every day. And we had gone from serving in hotel pans to serving boxed meals every single day, in addition to the children's meals, the caregiver meals as well. So we were running into issues with capacity, cold storage space. It was just really a challenge for us to continue serving both the students and the caregivers. We realized how important this was for our families. Not only was it providing expanded food access, but it was really a convenience for our families too, during these challenging times where parents are taking on more and more roles and responsibilities. So when the CARES Act funding came through, the city was a huge advocate for supporting this program and saw the importance of it, and creating a unique relationship with organizations like Good Work Austin. Now with the caregiver meal program, the meals being prepared by local Austin restaurants and then being delivered to our sites and distributed by our team members. So that's kind of the roundabout way of where we are today and how we began the relationship with Good Work Austin.
Great. Thank you. So Amit, very different kind of food distribution. I know that you just told us in your introduction that Elbwain took a nap for a day and came and woke up, and you were in a totally different world where you needed to have be producing 3 times as much food. What happened?
Yeah, well, it's really easy for me to say because I'm just really narrating the narrative. That's one of the call and response songs of the organization throughout the pandemic. And what we needed to do, and what we had been doing, was serving around 6,000 families with the support of our partners, and uniquely the Central Texas Food Bank, who so integral in our ability to be able to serve families in the South and Southeast and Southwest Austin region. Now, at post-pandemic, of course, food access and food insecurity became, just like so many other disparities have demonstrated, the food insecurity became highly pervasive. And so the demand skyrocketed. And El Buen Samaritano, whose mission is, of course, to connect families and individuals to, healthcare, education, and basic needs, was really, really drilling into the basic needs and seeing how that spanned out, effectively affecting the outcomes of really any other area that we were serving folks. So we needed to make sure that we could serve people. And my understanding is the capacity increased, nearly exponentially, as we know. The threefold increase occurred immediately. And so nearly from day one, the capacity of our pantry was, again, with the support of the food bank, at around 150 families per day. And to be clear, there are more families that would need services, but as far as our limitations were concerned, very much as Lindsay was mentioning, their limiting factors, our brick and mortar, our storage area, our fridge space, we had maximized everything that we can do within our tangible barriers to be able to serve folks. And that is where we began to get creative with partnerships, and this is also one of the unique value adds of working with Good Work Austin and others like Cook's Nook, and the constellation of organizations that really bring all of these partnerships together. We were able to offer not only a new and disruptive, if you will, positively disruptive offering of different kinds of foods, prepared meals, using ingredients that are distinct from ingredients that folks are traditionally using, who come to visit our pantry. And not only were we able to sort of create an equity and access to these types of foods, which many of us, already have access to and perhaps take for granted, that, there's actually cultural disparities that prevent folks from experiencing meals in this way. We were able to offer high quality restaurant meals in a prepared fashion to folks, which not only extended our capacity just effectively by displacement, allowing us to serve more families, up to 180, 190 families, but I think has had an effect not only obviously on the supply chain and just the food chain, if you will, in general, and the incentive alignment around organizations, but it's shifting, I think, the demand at the consumer level. And in speaking with folks, we are seeing that folks are coming to the pantry earlier, and I've even mapped out, I think, the distribution of when folks are arriving. They're coming earlier to get access to these meals, which we're sharing with our seniors. They're coming earlier to get access to these meals because it's so turnkey and comfortable for seniors to have these meals prepared. They've expressed that this well-roundedness of ingredients is so helpful for them. because they otherwise wouldn't be making such well-rounded meals, and that the healthful approach is really good, particularly for their station in life, where they're trying to care for their health. So, these partnerships have now enabled us to think outside of the box and look at not only how can we scale in different fashions, in addition to our existing extremely valuable partnership with the food bank, but how the demand side cultural shift is occurring. And I think that's something that's really salient that hopefully we may be able to dig into further.
Thank you. Edwin, and I know, I mean, we didn't even start working with you until October, I think, was when we were finally able to get that relationship set up and have raised enough money to be able to get some restaurants hooked up with you. And it was a completely different category of client than we had been able to get to, than we'd been able to serve until then. Really glad to have met you. Edwin, I guess I'm going to jump in quickly and I'm going to do the quick Locadoro version, and then Edwin can give us the like kind of 1,000-foot view from the city's perspective. I'm wearing my Locadoro hat and my Good Work Austin hat at the same time here. We were, as a small business, we were late to the party. I think we were still thinking that this was going to be a couple of week disruption. We were going to, and did not have a plan in place. We moved to go pretty quickly, but not in a very safe way, in a way where, people were waiting in line. And there was not distancing, there was not masking. It was not as controlled as it needed to be, and we shut that down. But within that week and a half, we'd already started the conversation about food access and food insecurity, and restaurants have spaces, and they have kitchens, and they have employees, and even if this was only going to be 2 weeks to a month, what could we do to keep people at work and to keep people busy and keep producing food and also help Austin? So it took a while to figure out the route. The fact that AISD actually had the forethought to get the RFPs out to businesses was a huge bump, because it wasn't until we started doing the AISD program and we're able to share that with 5 other restaurants and get other people on board and figure out what the best way to go about doing that is, because it is not just putting the food that you make into a to-go box and cashing your $5 check from the school district. This is not, we didn't have the right boxes. We didn't have the right food. We had to figure out, we had to move around our storage and kind of completely recreate the restaurant in order to be able to be a place that makes 5 times the food at 1/5 of the cost, which is basically what my partner turned us into. And what that's meant for the restaurants is that they were able to keep full time. I mean, we were able to at least create a predictable, consistent, safe way of doing business and revenue stream that we could keep our employees on board. The rest of it, after AISD and after we were able to show some track record, finding our way through the city to figure out who to talk to about where more of those kinds of jobs could come from and why they were going to national catering chains and not locally owned businesses, when we also knew that the city didn't have grant money or loan money for local businesses, was another couple of months. And during those couple of months, tens of thousands of meals and hundreds of thousands of dollars was going out the door to outside of the circle. If we're going to talk about, I mean, it's a simple metaphor, the metaphor of the circular economy, but that's what was happening. And it was frustrating. And it wasn't, I think it was sometime around finding the food policy group and finding the Office of Sustainability. We had talked to every city council member and they all thought it was a great idea, but didn't really know who was running the chains for all of the food contracts either. So it was this is definitely one of the lessons of what can change, what has changed a little bit, but what really needs to change moving forward if we're going to get to a place of greater circularity and greater resilience, which we'll talk about more in the second half. So at this point now, there are more than 15 restaurants working at any given time. We've helped to keep over 275 employees at living wages. It's one of our requirements for having a restaurant participate in the program is be paid that every employee make at least $15, that you source at least half of your ingredients from local local sustainable sources, and that you use recyclable or compostable packaging. And we've produced over 600,000 meals. So it's an incredible program. We wish, like everybody here, that it didn't have to exist. But now that it does, there are so many ways to involve restaurants looking for that I'm really excited to talk about. And Edwin, I'm going to use that to lead into you and the evolution of the city's thought process from March to today.
Yeah, thanks again. And I'll drive back to February. I was actually somewhat ironically at the National Good Food Network conference in New Orleans in February, when it first became pretty apparent that the pandemic was not just going to be something that happened over there, but that it was going to affect everything in my community and in the country and in the world. So I never forget driving home from that conference from New Orleans. I spent 12 hours on the phone talking about how to start thinking about this response. The biggest challenge, first and foremost, was, we live in a global supply chain. The food system is certainly global. Our calculations are that, Austin area produces less than 1% of its own food. And so thinking about this pandemic and were the trucks going to keep driving down I-35 and dropping food off, and what the heck were we going to do if those trucks stopped driving down I-35 to drop food off? That was, all that I thought about for quite a while during the very early stages of this pandemic. And so that, radically affected the way that I approached what we needed to do, which was we need to have contracts in place with the most secure possible sources for food. And so we looked nationally for organizations that could potentially step in to bolster local efforts and potentially supplant local efforts if those were disrupted for any reason. And so, what I've learned since then was what we need to have in place is pre-existing contracts embedded into our emergency response plans. In the collaboration with Good Works Austin and the leadership, honestly, from the school district and from nonprofits like Help When, has made it very clear that these are the best practices that we can do. And I'm delighted to say that I feel pretty good about what we're doing now in terms of best practices. Obviously, we have room to grow, but getting contracts in place before a pandemic hits again, or before another natural disaster hits again, is critical. And one that has, a broad range of community values embedded into it is going to be really, really important. And we can do that. I think we now have precedents for that. We now have city leadership and county leadership and other elected officials that realize that this is, just simply what we have to do in the future. That said, what's probably not obvious to a lot of people that sort of see this from the outside is that the state of Texas is set up in a pretty unique way. Obviously, the state government is unique, but the way that school districts are completely separate from municipal governments, in the way that we basically just have multiple overlapping governmental organizations that are responsible for various parts of addressing needs in the community. And it can be fairly effective in some ways. One of the definitions of resilience is that sort of overlapping capacity. But what I've learned during this pandemic is that it also creates a lot of challenges. When I look to my peers in other states, for instance, New York City, the city of New York manages all of the school district contracts in the same way that it manages all of the other city contracts. You create an ability to get things done in a little bit different way. And so we don't have that ability, and maybe that's good, maybe it's not. But what it does mean is that we have to do different kinds of planning. We have to do a lot more planning. There's still a lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities for who's actually accountable for feeding our community during disasters. We had some really difficult conversations early on in the pandemic about if the local nonprofit community and the faith-based communities are not able to provide food for people experiencing homelessness, whose responsibility is it? And I feel like the buck should probably stop with the city of Austin. I was certainly one of many other opinions on how that could work, and we still don't necessarily have great clarity around that. One of my aspirations for the next phase of my work is to get a lot more clarity on, in this situation, this is how this works, and this is who's responsible, and this is sort of the process that these things move through, and that roles and responsibility really does need to be clarified. It needs to be clarified in a mutually agreeable way, where people can come to the table and have discussions about what would be the best possible outcomes. And that's one of the real challenges during a disaster, is you often don't have the time to sort of say what's the best possible outcome. Me and my team spent countless hours in March just saying, get this done. Like, we've got to get whatever we can done. And that often leads to less than ideal outcomes. So, with that sort of lesson learned, how do we take this time now, as we're hopefully winding down this, peak pandemic and moving into the next phase of the response, to really embed those lessons learned into emergency operation plans with clarified roles and responsibilities, with better language written into contracts, or at least, pre-existing RFPs that can be rolled out at a pretty quick pace, but that honor really important things like fair labor. What Good Works Austin does in terms of addressing fair labor is it decreases the need for the kind of stuff that we're trying to solve for. We know that food doesn't solve food insecurity. There's no amount of food that can address the total food insecurity in the community. Food insecurity is a multifaceted thing, generally rooted in poverty and oppression. So using contracts that address food insecurity, not just to get good, nutritious food out the door, but also to start addressing the underlying problem with what causes food insecurity. Restaurant workers are some of the highest, levels of food insecure in our community. Some of the highest recipients of SNAP benefits are, workers at, gigantic grocery chains that put food on the shelves. Using city contracts to get to that, to try to decrease the actual need for the food insecurity responses, is a pretty great thing. But unfortunately, that's not business as usual. That takes a pretty significant shift in the way that we think about things and the way that we put things together.
Yeah, thank you. Relocated, so now I'm much safer now, and so are the rest of you. That is a great note on the day that there's a debate over the Raise the Wage Act, which came up today and is a part of the CARES Act, and I think is I sense to everybody, to folks that is a part of coronavirus, of pandemic recovery, that to include something like the Raise the Wage Act in a coronavirus relief package makes sense for exactly the reasons that Edwin was just saying. And yet we know that we're about to go into a fight about that, the minimum wage. What does raising the minimum wage have to do with recovering from the pandemic? And I'm going to interject before we move on to kind of our next, to sort of the second half, to say, in the hospitality industry, 60% of people in tipped minimum wage states, which Texas is, where we only make $2.13 an hour, or where we can pay our people $2.13 an hour if we choose, 60% of hospitality workers in those states did not qualify for unemployment benefits because their wages were so low that it didn't appear as though they had jobs. And that has made this last year so much more difficult for all of us than it needed to be. You know, you had that many more people who needed unemployment, who needed more, who weren't getting unemployment, who weren't putting any money back into the economy, and who also were needing resources from us in order to be fed every week. So if, you know, livable wages are not part of a recovery plan, then we are just going to find ourselves back at the same place again the next time we have something to recover from. Lindsay, a lot has worked this year. Like I said, not only the restaurants that have been able to benefit, that have been able to help the program, but also the distributors who we've worked with have been able to keep people employed, and we know that the caregivers have been able to count on at times 14 meals a week. Right now we're doing 8 meals a week, and they're able to pick them up pretty conveniently at the same time that they pick up their children's food. What does this mean going forward? I mean, I know we've talked about how the way that AISD is a education provider and a food provider is complicated. So, you know, how can you use some of the lessons of the pandemic to make the 21-22 school year and forward look different? What are whether it's through public-private partnerships, whether it's through feeding more of the community, or whether, you know, I think there are a couple different ways that we've talked about.
Yeah, you know, we're going to keep doing what we're doing as long as we can and as long as our community needs it. But, you know, everything that we do is pretty much dependent on the Department of Agriculture. We are allowed to do the things that we're doing. We're allowed to serve curbside meals. We're allowed to serve any child under the age of 19, regardless of whether they're an AISD student or not. We're able to provide weekend meals and meals during student breaks. That is all through a series of waivers that we had to apply for that were granted to school districts for this year only. Most of those waivers are set to expire at the end of June. And it's hard to know where we'll be at the end of June and what our world will look like moving forward. If there's any silver lining in our world that has come out of the pandemic, it has really proven the important role that schools do play in community food access. We're recognizing how, you know, cities, communities across the country are relying on schools as a primary source of nutrition. And that just helps raise awareness of how important it is for us to feed all students, not just those determined to be in most need, either whether it be by where they live or, you know, whether it be income during a certain period of time. We hope that universal free meals could be here to stay. And so, you know, that helps bring equity to our schools, it helps bring equity to our cities, and it creates food access for all students that need and deserve it in our communities. And so again, that is fully dependent on the Department of Agriculture and what is decided, you know, at the higher level moving forward with what universal meals looks like. The more funding, the more meals that we serve, the more funding that we have to put into our meal program. You know, we have a great relationship with the city. We partner together on the Good Food Purchasing Program, you know, that aligns with kind of what Edwin and Adam were talking about, fair labor being one of the components of that program, making sure that we're sourcing from quality vendors as well. And so the more students that we feed, the more we can allocate our funds towards higher quality purchases, and sourcing from quality vendors. So no matter where or how meals are served, we're going to continue that commitment. And, we would love to continue the relationships that have come through this pandemic, with groups like Good Work Austin. Just in our world, we're just not sure what that looks like yet. We're not sure how we'll be serving meals 6 months from now. And so there's a lot that's just really up in the air for us, in regards to funding and how we can serve meals and serve our communities.
Can I ask about the good food, follow-up question on good food purchasing? Are there incentives for the school district to buy certain kinds of food or from certain places?
I mean, yes, there are incentives.
Are there financial incentives from the city or from the city, county, or state?
Not
in
currently.
the good food. Okay, the good food. So the good food purchasing program is not is encouraging, but is encouraging you to, but is not helping you make that so.
Correct. I mean, incentive to us is creating systemic change, for us in Austin and, for children and families across the country, to have better sourced food and good food. So, there are some things in the works that, we're hoping down the line that will create an incentive program. Some states do that with their Department of Agriculture, where you're incentivized by purchasing local, things like that. And so that's not to say that something like that is not, in the future. But sure. Currently it's something that we're dedicated to as a district, and have made that commitment to.
Yeah, great. And I was not, and maybe I should have said subsidized instead of incentivized. I wasn't suggesting that you were looking to make a few extra bucks off of a kid who was going to get an organic salad with his with his school lunch. But Edwin, whether or not,
I don't know if Edwin wants to chime in on that too.
Yeah, I mean,
he will. Let's jump in and let Amit do his part, and then Edwin can make all of us make sense at the end. Amit, same question. Where what does the evolution look like? What do you want to have continue post-pandemic? And what are the things that are working right now that are going to change a little bit post-pandemic that are going to make El Buen strong, that have made El Buen stronger? Oh, you're muted.
Someone had to do it. If we could begin with the notion, and I think we've all sort of made sure to mention this, that of all of the benefit, that disruptive benefit that we could see here, I just can't speak about it without recognizing the gravity of the circumstance and how pervasive food insecurity is. Now, with that given being stated, I see a lot of positive disruption potential. And, I think a lot of it has been already initiated and ensconced in many ways. And it's the trajectory that I'm excited, again, qualified by the previous statement, I'm excited to see. In that 2 days, 3X, 20K number, our team, Rosa Carroll, who's, been running our pantry for almost 15 years, it can size up a family from 100 feet away and just know exactly sort of what their whole need set might be. Juan Rosa also has been, supporting the pantry in our programs for 15 years. Amanda Dunges, who manages that program. All of this team is, as they've scaled this up, we have really worked to, under Dr. Murillo's leadership, to try to make our approach just far more human-centered. If somebody is arriving at El Buen Samaritano at our food pantry for services, we don't assume that all they're looking for is food. We're, out making conversations with them in the morning at a safe distance, of course, checking in with folks, doing our best to provide a top level customer service. So folks are coming in, and if we think there's going to be a delay, we're out walking along the line, apologizing to everyone for the delay and thanking everyone for visiting us. Everyone's like, oh no, to the contrary, thank you. And everybody should feel that they are a top of the line customer, because they are. And so part of that approach is just making sure that we're offering everything we can that individual might need or might want, at that point of entry. And that makes it easier for them. Of course, we're doing our best to meet people where they are when they come to visit us, and provide a really, really high quality service. As we're doing that, and we're able to provide meals like, for example, through the Safe Table program, the ones that we're providing through Chez Z, meals, from Cook's Nook, Easy Tiger, through so many of the collaborations. Anyone, I don't know if it's possible to have a panel occur without mentioning RNA. Anything associated with him. These meals, really, I think, in the same way that Adam is mentioning, the importance of the livable wage, of local sourcing, of sustainable packaging, sort of ensconcing these ideals at the outset, these guiding principles at the outset in a program. We're also doing that in some way, form, or fashion by really introducing, or if anything, introducing access to a different kind of meal, to a different type of ingredient, to a different level of service to folks who haven't necessarily been experiencing those things before. And, so not only by virtue of, again, addition to our food supply, we're able to serve more families, but we're really able to, I think, change perspectives. And I have maybe a dozen audio clips from different folks who are receiving these meals, talking about, the value of these meals, what these meals uniquely bring. Oh, wow, it's a different cultural thing that I never would have tried. Oh, well, he doesn't like to eat vegetables. Actually, our culture, we're not big on vegetables in general, but this is so nicely done and well prepared. We are eating them and we love them, and we need to be eating these vegetables right now. And that's somebody who, in another car, I have sugar at this time. And so, these meals are really good, meaning that they've got diabetes issues. And so in doing so, I believe that, alluding back to the comment that not only are we just by virtue of the supply chain and by moving what was otherwise this massive inert reliance upon just existing systems and existing supply chains, by doing that, we are, I think, improving sustainability for a sector of the workforce, and also just making sure that folks have access to high quality, meals made of whole ingredients and, that are locally sourced and not processed, and sort of experiencing, if they are deriving a benefit from that or not. And also really just sharing that part of Austin's culture. I think Austin has very, very clearly, to belabor the adage, been a tale of two cities, and that's been exacerbated more than ever during the pandemic. So folks are eating the same meals that they may not have had access to, that maybe higher income or better off or more privileged folks might have been having access to. And finally, we're inculcating that demand. At many levels, not just at the consumer level, who is now exposed and experiencing these types of meals, the broad facet, that are being offered, but affecting the demand side, which I think we can all agree that the demand side is likely the most one of the most organic, if you will, avenues to affecting systemic change. We're affecting the demand side of the nonprofit service partners, of any entities involved in that supply chain and demand chain, meaning that, you know, if this program were to stop and you know, when we hear it's refunded, we're like, oh great. But if these programs were to stop, there is now a void, because folks like GWA, folks like Edwin, you know, folks like the district were able to just move these huge inert barriers for a moment by means of this disruptive pandemic, to be able to create space for these supply chains, such that now if you break that chain, wow, there's an incentive misalignment that needs to be addressed, or there's a void that needs to be addressed. So I really, really appreciate that. And so the trajectory I see forward is that, you know, that void will say, I don't believe that void will be tolerated. And I feel like new models have been introduced and they're here to stay.
Thank you. It is great hearing some of the firsthand customer interactions. I'm going to try and do my part in 1 minute, so that Edwin has some time, and that maybe we have a second for questions. The dream is that this doesn't end. That instead of having 15 restaurants making you know, a couple thousand, making 15,000 meals a week, that we have 150 restaurants making 50 to 100 meals a week each. That we have these restaurants in every part of the city, so that they're feeding their own community, that they're the ones who are receiving the contracts from the city, that the contracts are getting spread out to more of these different places, to more different people. And if they all go through Good Work Austin, great. I'm happy to, we're happy to be a funnel, but it's really just a matter of getting that funding to smaller places that are paying good wages, that are maybe using this extra revenue stream to then hire somebody in their same community, and then we're solving problems. Then we're creating we're creating jobs and creating meals and supporting local entrepreneurship. And you know, that circle, the idea that $1 spent at a local business is $3 for the community. You know, it goes so much further than what can be done by the chain that has maybe a branch office, employ people here, but the rest of the money is all getting shipped to wherever it is that their shareholders are. You know, that's the short version of how we would like to continue continue and expand Good Works' relationship with Austin, and do our part in making restaurants more a part of this conversation. The thing that I feel like I've also been saying for the last 6 months is, when I started coming on these the food policy group conversations, and some of the other conversations happened in the city, there weren't restaurants involved there. And so there are these two sides of the world. There was like, that were all based around the same things, food and people. And there was the whole part of the world that was creating food for people who can't pay for it. And then there was the whole part of the world that was creating food for people who can pay for it. And they weren't talking to each other. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that you have all these food producers not involved, and it's racist. It creates it's inequitable, and it doesn't help solve any of our problems. And it's not. And there are problems that the restaurants need solved also. Like when I talk about incentives for buying, when I talk about incentives with Lindsay, small local restaurants are looking for the same thing. It is not easy for us to buy local sustainable ingredients and have to charge the same as the place down the street that isn't doing any of those things, and then tell you guys in the room, try and convince you that it's worth paying $5 more for the same dish because I bought mine from a better farm. That is a backwards way of incentivizing good agriculture. We spend billions of dollars incentivizing bad agriculture and feeding, too much sugar, feeding, too much sugar and too much salt to people who can't afford to buy food. That we could spend some of that money up front and solve a lot of health problems and a lot of food insecurity problems. And so we wouldn't be spending that money on the back end on healthcare and SNAP benefits and so on and so forth. I'm sorry, Edwin, I took 4 minutes.
Everything I want to say. Yes.
It's not
absolutely
true.
I would have said it. I would have used catchier phrases, but I mean, hell yeah, Adam. Hell yeah. The only thing I'll add is that there is a term we use called value-based procurement. And what we've been working on for a number of years at the City of Austin is integrating value-based procurement into what our food contracts look like. And as Lindsay touched on, the program that we're most excited about, it's called the Good Food Purchasing Program. It's a national nonprofit that facilitates the program in about 25 different cities around the country. It's basically a scoring lens, sort of like LEED certification, but for institutional food procurement. It's not the end-all be-all. It's not going to solve all the world's problems, but it does elevate the conversation, and it asks hard questions, and you can use the language in that value-based procurement system to embed those things into contracts and push contracts in certain ways to ensure that the kind of things that we're talking about today actually happen more frequently. Now, the challenge is cost, and you're exactly right that currently the Good Food Purchasing Program does nothing to help institutions at a bigger scale, but it could. So currently the federal government subsidizes crappy food and doesn't subsidize good food. We could, with better policy, flip that around, and we could food really cheap. That is a decision that we as a country can make. We can literally make that decision. It is not something that's inconceivable, but we can also start working on that at the local level. And one of the things I would love to see happen is local governments subsidizing better food to stop externalizing the costs. So we have the opportunity here at the City of Austin and Travis County and other local or governmental organizations to start subsidizing better quality food. So would love to see that happen. But the other thing that also needs to happen is we need to have a national food policy. We have a lot of things that happen at the federal level that affect our food system, but very few of them, if any, are actually coordinated. There's a precedent now for countries creating an actual statement that says this is how we should look at our food system, and this is where our food system should go. And this is the role of the food system at the national level, and this can be the role at the state level, and then local governments can fit in. We now have a new administration at the federal level that could be much more receptive to the concept of having a national food policy that can get to so many of the things that we talked about and empower local governments and empower local businesses to be part of that solution. So last thing I'll say is $10 million on emergency food in 2020. It's the most single expenditure around food that the city or county have ever spent. Did it address the total need? Absolutely not. But it's a lot more than we've ever spent. We're also projected to spend a similar amount, actually a little bit more in 2021. I'm certainly committed to trying to address all of the value-based procurement things that I feel like we've touched on in this conversation in 2021, trying to move those contracts in the right direction and support them. That said, Adam, you're the first to know it's really difficult to do that work at the municipal level. But I'm certainly committed to it, and really just appreciate all of the amazing work that you guys do. And I'm visiting you guys at El Buen a few weeks ago, a month ago, was amazing. Seeing the great work that you guys do, and seeing Lindsay, you out at the mass feeding distribution, in December was also fantastic. I just deeply appreciate the work that you guys do, and it's hard to comprehend the scale of the challenge that we're doing, that we're trying to address, but with y'all's help, we can make this work.
Thank you, Edwin. Yeah, I mean, we're at 4 o'clock. I don't know are we cut off, Joy? Is there anyone who, if we wanted to take 5 minutes to answer a question or two, if there are any questions or two?
Hey.
Or if there are any questions? Okay.
Hey, I just jumped into hey, y'all.
Hi.
Hi, we're actually front of stage. I'm not even supposed to do this, but I got all kinds of magical powers. Actually, technically, why don't you guys go ahead and take a minute? I think you're supposed to be backstage. Colin's back there. I think he's got one more thing to show right at the end of yours. So, Colin, forgive everybody. Go ahead, take a minute, and if you got any questions, and then we'll wrap up. I think all the other sessions are finishing up too, and then everybody will be staged to see the last video of the day.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to leave it. I'll leave it to the chat, or if I see anybody who wants to join, who wants to click that button at the top to add themselves, and I can and you can ask. You can pop up on our Hollywood Square. If not, I'm gonna say my favorite thing that Edwin said in this week when we were redefining success, and the job is to work ourselves out of a job. You know, in this case, like I don't want to come back in front of you next year. Well, I mean, this year is different, so we will have some of the same conversation, but I don't want to come back in front of everybody every year and say Good Work Austin is making more meals than we made the year before. That's not what was supposed to happen. We're supposed to be out of the meals business because there aren't hungry people. And that's unfortunately not, I think, how folks are raising money right now in the meals in the nonprofit sector, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's not, you know, Mobile Loaves and Fishes, Meals on Wheels can't click it. They can't snap their fingers and solve some of the problems that everyone was just talking about. But we have to. Everybody in this panel and everybody in this do the work of advocating at the federal level for these changes at the Department of Agriculture. All right. I think we must have said everything that we needed to say because there are no questions. Lindsay, Edwin, Amit, it has been a pleasure getting to meet with you guys to talk about this program, to talk about this panel. Please check out the Good Work Austin website. We've got a couple of initiatives coming up for Amplify Austin and for South by Southwest. There's going to be some good food involved in them. And thank you.
Thank you to Adam for all your work. Thank you, Lindsay, and Edwin as well. It's great to be with all of you.
Have great Wednesdays, everyone. Bye-bye.